Hey, what's going on, guys? Amir Baluch with Side Hustle MD. I know you guys have been looking forward to this podcast just from the title alone. We're going to talk about how you can start your own podcast as a side hustle. We have an expert here, Dr. Darko. Not only is he a trauma surgeon, but he's also the owner of his podcast, Docs Outside the Box. And he has hundreds of episodes. He's been doing this for years. I've known him for about 4 years now. He's made huge progress. So if you guys want information, you got to tune into this episode. It's going to be amazing. Nee, thanks for coming on board, taking time out for all the side hustlers out there.
Hey, Amir, thank you for having me here. And what's up to all the side hustlers that are out there? I definitely know what it's like. So it's great to be here. It's good to talk to y'all. And hopefully we get y'all talking about podcasting, or at least starting your own podcast.
Yeah, man. It's so awesome. You're in the trenches. I remember, we talked on the phone. I think you didn't even have 8 episodes on your podcast because I was thinking about, asking you, hey, how do you get started? All this kind of stuff. Like, we're actually both new to it and you just took it to another level. But what is your podcast about? How did you decide to even do this podcast? Like, people don't talk about this in medical school. There's really no courses about this stuff. Like, how did this idea even come into your head?
Yeah, that's basically the whole point is let's teach you the things that you probably should have learned in medical school, but they didn't. So the podcast is called Docs Outside the Box. We've been putting this podcast out since April of 2016. So depending on when this podcast comes out, when this episode comes out, we're talking about over 5 years, right? Close to 6 years of putting out the show. We're on episode 260, once again, depending on when this show comes out. But, it's something that turned out to be a passion project, talking about doctors who were, just living these extraordinary lives outside of clinical medicine, to, transitioning to now where we talk about how do we get doctors, how do we get other professionals to really do what they've always wanted to do in their life, right? Yeah. And what we call that is your mission, right? If you want to work in other countries, if you want to, whatever you want to do, how do we get you to activate that by really maximizing your money, right? So how do we teach you the money things that you never were taught? How do you get your personal finance in order, student loans, investing, real estate, side hustles, all those different things we talk about in money. And then we also, on the other end, talk about mindset, right? Because you also got to believe you can do it. It's not just wanting to do it. You got to believe that, I can do this and I can do this really well. So we talk about everything related to the growth mindset. We give examples of other doctors who are killing it. And we also showcase the stories of doubt, people who were, spent their entire lives wanting to be doctors, and maybe their entire family put all of their efforts and all of their dreams into this, and then maybe deciding, I don't want to become a doctor, I want to become a painter, or I want to go and work in Congo, or maybe I want to work in another war-torn area of the world, or maybe I just want to go on TV, right? So we talk about all of these different things to let people know that, listen, whatever you want to do in life, you can do it. Here's these examples of how you can do it. Here's how you get your personal finances in order so that you can take those first couple of steps. And then this is also an opportunity to hear about what it's like to go through doubt, what it's like to go through insecurities, and how all of these different folks push past it. So pretty excited about it. It's on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, anywhere you can find it. We don't talk like your normal doctors. We keep it real. We talk, very down to earth, because we think that is something that you get enough of in the surgery lounge or, M&Ms. Like, I don't want to hear all that. We just want to talk. And I love it, and it's something that I'm glad to be doing.
Yeah, it's a very cool podcast, man. It's very inspirational. Plus, you have the how-to in there. So, pretty much every doctor needs to be listening to this. And, it's so hard to get into medical school, but then at the same time, after accomplishing that, we think we have these fears about accomplishing something else. But I think when we see other people break through those glass ceilings, that's when people can really become unlimited and figure out what their passion is and go after it. It's just like, I think, don't quote me on this, but I think after somebody had broken the 4-minute mile, like the next year, a dozen people broke the 4-minute mile. They just need to know that, hey, other people are doing it too. And then they jump on board too. So that's very cool. So your podcast, you had all these episodes. What has it done for like your career and your life, the last 5 years?
So, so the way how I describe it is, this is going to sound crazy, but just how important it was for me to get into medical school, to finish residency and finish fellowship. Like those are really big accomplishments for me. Starting my podcast is up there, actually. Right.
Wow.
It really is up there because it completely changed the trajectory of my career. It really changed the way in which I relate to people, talk to people, how I think of myself as a physician. And I think that when I tell people this, they're like, "Nah, that's like you're exaggerating." I'm like, "No, like I really, up until that point, up until 2016, I really just looked at myself as a surgeon, as a physician, and that was it, right? If you could look at like a pie, right? Like everything about me, 100% revolved around being a physician, which I think we all are starting to realize that that's really an incorrect way of looking at life, right? Like I'm a husband, I'm a brother, I'm a
Right.
father. I enjoy business, I enjoy podcasting. There's just so many different things to me that make Nee Darko who he is. And I think for you also, for anybody else who's listening to that show, and what the podcast has helped me to really understand is that the more I lean into me, or if I lean into myself more, I actually can succeed more in life than just saying, well, I'm a doctor and I'm just going to do this for the rest of my life. And I think that um, to a lot of medical students, to a lot of residents who don't know, and then you contrast that to a lot of attendings and people who've been in medicine for a long period of time, that zeal, that being naive, that wanting to cure the world of all the different ailments that you have before you become a doctor, like before you actually start practicing as a doctor, a lot of that stuff goes out the wayside or falls by the wayside once you are on the other side, right? And I think that it's really important that these podcasts, my podcast and other podcasts out there, continue to let people know that, listen, like getting into medical school is very difficult and it requires a certain mindset that a lot of people don't have. The ability to succeed through it, get through residency. Like there are certain skills that are transferable to a whole bunch of other fields out there in the world, whether it's finance, whether it's whatever it may be, right? So don't feel like you have to put all your eggs in one basket. I think it's unhealthy for us to not
Yeah.
teach other people about this. So for me, that's what we try to do on this show. That's why it's been really important for me, because it's helped to really decrease the amount of stress, the amount of burnout that I may have had if I didn't have the show. And listen, it's 2022. We trying to double down on this. So I think if the listeners come on, they're gonna see more episodes from us talking about this.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of good points there. Like one of the most important points I just heard is don't put all your eggs in one basket. I mean, if we learn anything from COVID and decreasing reimbursements, I mean, nothing is guaranteed. No one stream of income, no one type of career path is guaranteed. So definitely diversify, at least, put multiple, fishing rods in the water and see what takes off and what doesn't take off. So that's really important. And we already talked about my background story. I mean, my dad was a doctor and he ended up going bankrupt from not running his business right and a bunch of other financial mistakes that he made, which is, part of the reason I got so passionate about this stuff too. So I'm like, from when I was 21, I was like, man, we got to diversify. And then seeing some of the episodes on your podcast, I mean, this is just like amazing. Some things I never thought that doctors could do, they're doing it. So that's pretty awesome.
Yeah. It's and the other thing too is just from a psychological standpoint, right? Like it's stressful as hell being a doctor. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? It's stressful as hell being a doctor, and it's great if you want to do that. That's also awesome. But what are you gonna do when you don't want to do that, right? Like you want to do this when you're in your 60s or 70s. Like there's other things to think about, right?
Right.
And it's really important to have these conversations because it's really, like if we're not, the whole point of this also is when you finish, what's it going to say on your headstone, right? When you're done with
Yeah.
this, right? Like, did you change medicine, right? Like I've already come to the realization that there's not going to be any Darko technique, right? There's no like Darko procedure that's coming up, right? So my legacy in clinical medicine is short, right? So this is my opportunity to help medicine, to help med students, to help residents, people who are training to understand that, it's great what you did. It's amazing. But listen, don't forget about this other thing that you may have been thinking about that you've been suppressing because you think people are going to laugh at you. You don't think people are going to take you seriously. Hey, that is very important. Consider that also. And I agree with you wholeheartedly, man. And I'd like to hear more about that story, what you're talking about with
Yeah.
your dad, because I think a lot of people need to hear that.
Yeah. I might even just do it as a intro to something, or just talk about that on my podcast also, which by the way, you're part of the inspiration for my podcast 4 years ago too. So
Thank you.
now some other people are listening and they're like, wow, so this is how I could put my dent in the world, is with a podcast.
Yeah.
I think it was Steve Jobs. Don't quote me on that either, but I think it was Steve Jobs that said, hey, just find out how you could put your dent in the world and make an impact. But let's say outside of making an impact and getting the word out on something, like you're showing doctors how they could, pursue their passions and the how to, and also how to be a little bit more financially savvy to live out those other dreams. What are some other things people can look to accomplish by having a podcast as a side hustle?
So I think the most important thing to understand now is that, people say all this stuff like Web 2.0, Web 3.0, and all these different things. Like I don't speak in those type of like topics and stuff, but I just say right now, like, I think most people can pretty much say like just having a website is not enough anymore, right? Like if you want to learn about someone, if you want to learn about a practice, particularly if you have a private practice and you want people to come and see you, right? Like outside of reviews, which you don't have any control of, they come to your website, it's static and it's okay, but how do they really know more about you? How do you really stand out from someone else who has a really nice website and has a whole bunch of reviews? And I think the best way outside of doing TikToks and all those different things, which, it doesn't come natural to a lot of people, is doing a podcast. And the reason why I say that is like literally you can have a podcast where you're just talking just like this, maybe to a patient, giving patient education, or just talking about things that you enjoy to do in addition to you educating people, so people
Yeah.
can understand, oh, this person is really down to earth, or this person knows how to educate like a teacher, or this person knows XYZ, whatever, you fill it in.
Yeah.
So I think it's a really great way to differentiate yourself from other people in the fact that you're just being yourself, right? Like there's only so much personality that you can put on a website. There's only so much personality that you can put in anything else that's static. So I think a lot of people, particularly the lay public, are looking for additional like internet presence, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah.
And jumping onto a podcast, starting a podcast compared to a YouTube video is really low entry, right? Like you don't have to show you don't have to show your face. All you have to do is just talk your talk how you normally talk to patients, or talk how you normally talk to a friend who would ask you about that itch, where, or something like that, right? All you have to do is that. And I tell people that if you incorporate podcasts into your everyday life, you won't feel so much like every time you're doing a podcast it's like a grand rounds,
Yeah.
or it's like an Eminem, or it's like nobody's trying to hear that, right? Like
Right.
people can look this stuff up and go to the news and hear someone talk, oh, hoity toity. They really just want to know who you are. So
Yeah.
I tell people that, or particularly doctors, that it's really important to start that, so that when they go and they look at your website, they can see, oh, this person has a podcast. Let me hear how they talk. Let me hear how he or she talks, what they thinking about, what they talking about. Go from
Yeah.
there. That's one advantage to having a podcast.
Yeah, that's very cool. It sounds like, in summary, this is just really good for branding yourself when a website is not going to separate you from anybody else. So, I know, I've talked to a couple of people also that use podcasts and YouTube for branding, and these people charge premiums for their services. So, guys, if you're looking to go direct to consumer with something with your patients, or you just want more paid speaking gigs, there's so many opportunities out here. We're just scratching the surface. Like if you establish a brand with your podcast, I mean, people will be coming to you for opportunities. That's at least what I've seen. So even if you don't know what will happen from this podcast, just go out there and do it and get your message out there, whatever it is that you want to get out there to the people, and the opportunity is going to come one way or another. So, it's definitely something that people want to jump on, that should look into and jump onto. But I know that people out there also might have some holdups. They might be afraid of failure. In your experience, what have you seen have been the biggest reasons why people are not jumping in and starting it?
Well, I think the biggest reason is people hate their voices. They hate how they sound. right?
That's me right there. That's why
Right.
I stopped at like 6 podcasts, and I was like, I can't listen to myself anymore.
So they did a study on that actually, and they found out the majority of people can't stand their voices because we have this sense of we think we sound more professorial, or we sound smarter than we think. And then when we actually hear the recording back and it doesn't sound how we think we want to sound, we hate it. So I think it was like released on NPR, one of these studies. I found it. I looked it up and I found it like 5 years ago. Why do people hate their voice?
It's not just me. It's not just me. That's good.
It's not you, bro. It's not you. It's like everybody. And the key thing though is that's the point of podcasting, right? This is not radio. This is not TV. So you have to stop looking at this like, yeah, whatever I'm doing is going to replace what I see on CNN. Whatever I'm doing is going to replace what I see on NPR. Whatever I'm doing is going to replace. No, it's not like that at all. This is people who want to learn something while they're exercising, while they're driving to work, while they're at work, while they're washing the dishes. They want to be entertained. They may want to learn something. They may want to laugh. And they are tired of going to mainstream media for a certain thing, and they're not getting it anymore. So people are seeing this type of experience from podcasts and from YouTube videos, and they want that experience. So that's the number one thing that I tell my students, and I tell the clients, I'm like, look, like, just get over it for a little bit. Like, you do not have to be perfect. You can talk how you normally talk. You will be fine. You can say ums, you can say ahs, you can make a mistake. It doesn't matter. But if you can get over that number one thing, which is that perfection, right? You can actually train yourself into becoming a better podcaster. Yeah, like, nobody wants to say ums and ahs and likes all the time, but it takes time. It's a process. Right. That's the number one thing. The number two thing I think that keeps people from continuing with their podcast is just not having a plan, and also at the same time not knowing who they're speaking to, right? Like, if you're going to start a podcast, all you have to do is think in your mind, who do I want the perfect person to be listening to the show? We call that an avatar. Right. So if you create a show for everyone, there's a saying in when you're creating content, if you have a show, or if you have an idea and you're creating it for everyone, you're actually creating it for no one. Right. Because that means you have to create all of these different topics that appease everyone. Right. That pleases everyone. And that's extremely difficult to do. So my number one solution to that problem is find that one person, pick one person and say, this is their age, this is where they live, this is the radio stations they listen to, this is the magazines they read, this is the pain points that they have. And I'm going to focus on that one person and figure out if they're male, if they're female, don't matter, right? But make sure so that you can start creating content that's very personal to that person. And then what you will see is once you start putting great content to that person, there are going to be a whole bunch of different people who will be like, oh, wow, like, what he's saying or she's saying for this person or whoever he's talking to, that applies to me. Yeah. And then more and more people are going to listen and listen and listen. But when you're creating content, you're not trying to create content for the masses. You're creating content for that one person. And I think when they understand that concept, it really helps to take the anxiety down. It helps them to start being very specific and niche as to the type of content and ideas that they're putting out there.
Yeah, that makes sense to niche down and just have a specific message for that person that specifically wants to hear that message. Right. By the way, I got I don't know if this is a life hack or a podcast hack for that first issue. So what I did is I didn't listen to my voice. I just record it and I just wouldn't listen to it. I've never listened to any of my podcasts since after episode 6. Same with my last virtual summit. I never listened to the episode after that. I just recorded it. I kind of remember what I talked about, and that's it. so listen, really quick.
So that is amazing. So everyone who's listening, that's like life hack number one right there. If you still like after everything I said, you're like, man, still I don't want to hear my voice. Just do what Dr. Amir said. Just don't listen to it. Because people ask me, they're like, listen, like, what's your number one advice for people who are on the fence? I'm like, just consider this. Your most valuable podcast episode is the one that you just released. Right. And what I mean by that is you put so much weight into every episode. You try to make it sound as perfect as possible, but it ain't helping nobody if you don't put it out there. Right.
Right.
And then once someone listens to it, it's not like they're listening to it like they're a professor or they're listening to it like they're an English or a linguistic specialist. They just want to hear the information, man. So just put the damn information out there and then work on the next thing, right? Because that's how we are now in 2022, right? Like it is produce, someone will consume it, and then that's it. It goes to the back of their mind, and then they're going to look at you and be like, I want more. And you're going to be like, but I spent like 10 years trying to make this Picasso, and all you want to do is look at it for like a minute. Yeah. So that's why I tell people, get over yourself. It's really about just producing as much content as possible, giving them what they need, and then continuing to make the next thing. So yeah, just like you said, Dr. Amir, like it's like, put it out there, don't listen to it, but people are going to like it and they're going to find value from it, and then move on and go from there.
Yeah. So guys, we've talked about a couple steps you guys can take to get over your fears. And Nee has a special action step for you guys. Usually at the end of these recordings, I like to say, hey, what are 1, 2, 3 steps people can take today to get started? But when you do a podcast, there's multiple steps. Doesn't mean it's impossible, but there's some steps and you need a little bit of guidance. So Nee, I know you have a course, 10 Steps to Podcasting. Can you tell us what all is in that course and how that can help some of the listeners out there?
Yeah, man, I get tired of people keep asking me about podcasting, man. That's basically it, man. Stop asking me about podcasting. So I created this course. Mainly I created a course because I think we need more doctors podcasting, just full stop. We need more doctors podcasting for various reasons. One, to make sure that we remain like the definitive voice where people go to for medical information, and we have to meet people where they're at. And where people are at is they're on social media and they're on podcasts, right? The second thing is we need to be able to express our thoughts in very concise ways. And instead of going to like CNN or Fox News or wherever you go to, and you want to hear people describe what's going on in the medical field, like they don't know what we go through, right? So the reason why podcasting is important is really quick and easy way for all of you doctors out there to express exactly what you're going through, what you're thinking through, what your doubts are. So with my course, I'm just trying to get as many people podcasting as possible. And this goes to the medical students, this goes to the residents. And the name of the course is, like you said, it's called 10 Days to Podcasting. And it's a self-directed course. It's completely online. You take the course at the pace at which you want to take it. And what we do is you take you from step one. How do you come up with an idea, to the name, all the way to the end, where we talk about hosting and getting you on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and Anchor and all those different things, to maybe even start considering monetizing. And we've worked with people such as, I don't know if some of the guests or some of the listeners are familiar with Rich Doc, Poor Doc, which is hosted by Dr. Kenji and Letty, who are really big into real estate. We have Dr. T, who has the mindset experience, where he's now interviewing like the head coach of the Baltimore Ravens. So we've taken a bunch of people through this course. They've been very successful. And the key thing is, I know you docs are really busy. And this is a course where you do it at your own pace. We got templates and everything. So I'm super psyched for this. I hope people take the course because I really, really, truly believe that we really need to be out there talking in our own voices and taking control of our narrative.
That's awesome. Guys out there, if you want to take action, because this summit is for action takers and the real side hustlers out there, there's going to be a link below this video. You're also going to get an email about it. And we're also going to be doing a podcast live later on, so you guys can check it out, or a Facebook Live, so you can ask even more questions for those guys that know you want to do a podcast, but you know how to get started. So that's it, guys. We're going to have these action steps for you. Check out this episode again a second time if you're interested. And Nee, thanks for dropping some knowledge on the virtual summit today.
Amir, thanks for having me on here, man. Hope the listeners take action, yo. So this is right for you guys. Is ready.
All right.